sadness every day, feeling hopeless, just having an overall negative feeling about everything, low energy. Sounds like depression, right? Might not be depression though. It could be burnout. Do you know the difference between burnout and depression? Because they have very similar symptoms. In this video, we'll define what depression is and what burnout is, and two of the major differences between the two. We'll also talk about how to prevent burnout, and I'll tell you a little bit about my own personal experience with burnout. Welcome to Tisha Talk Wellness. I'm Tisha. Over here, we're all about mental wellness, personal growth, managing our emotions, trying to do better and feel better. I wanted to do a video on burnout because I have experienced burnout before. I didn't know I was experiencing burnout at the time, but throughout the years, as I got more experience as a mental health professional, I definitely can identify that I had burnout a couple of times. One of the major differences between depression and burnout is depression is a clinical diagnosis. Burnout is not. You can only be diagnosed with depression from a licensed mental health professional, and they'll use the DSM-5 manual to see if you meet 5 of the 8 criteria needed to say, yes, you have depression. That criteria includes specific symptoms that you have to report that you've been experiencing over a certain amount of time. Burnout is more of a state or a condition, but it's not a clinical diagnosis. However, they both have very similar symptoms. The 3 symptoms that depression and burnout have in common are low energy, negative outlook on life, trouble doing the daily task. Specifically for burnout, it's going to be not being able to do work tasks or tasks that you do daily. The reason why people get them mixed up is because depression is a more popular term. So everyone equates sadness or daily sadness with depression. However, you have to document and report that you have been sad over a certain period of time in order to be considered for a depression diagnosis. And even if you report you've been sad for more than a couple days of the week, there are other things that you have to be experiencing in order for you to technically be diagnosed with depression. Depression can be triggered by a life-changing event. It can have a genetic component to it, like if you have a parent that has depression. Burnout is a type of exhaustion that people experience when they are under a lot of stress over long periods of time. Burnout is typically associated with work burnout. However, you could be burnout just from doing a certain task. So you can have creative burnout, academic burnout, parental burnout, relationship burnout. The reason why people mix them up, because as soon as they start to experience burnout, they notice, oh, I'm just sad all the time. I have low energy. I must be depressed. I just don't care about what I'm doing every day. It's getting harder and harder to do a good job at work. I just don't care about the task I have to do around the house. And they automatically say, I think I'm depressed. The telltale sign that you may be suffering from burnout and not depression is when you're able to stop doing the task that you have been doing that has caused stress, you immediately feel relief. For example, if someone is experiencing work burnout because they've been working 20 days in a row and they take a weekend off, and that 3rd day they feel like a new person, most likely it's burnout. With depression, even if you take the stressors out of the situation, depression will still linger. There still has to be other interventions. That is the major difference between burnout and depression. The first time I experienced burnout was undergrad. I was finishing up my first degree and I was going in. I was going hard. I thought I was doing what I was supposed to do. I was working about 60 hours a week. I was taking 12 credit hours. I have no idea how I was doing that, y'all. I don't know why I thought I should do that. I just wanted to finish on time. And I had been working like that for about 2.5 semesters because I wanted to make money, of course, but I also wanted to finish and graduate on time. And I noticed about 2 months previously, I had become very dehydrated. So I started to drink water, but I wasn't getting enough rest. And while I was working every day, working overnights, going to school in the morning, I wasn't hydrated enough. I was doing my work duties and also having to write papers and just do all of the tasks that you need to do to graduate until I collapsed and passed out. I noticed that last semester I was overworked and I was not doing A work. I was doing like BC work. Nothing wrong with BC work if BC is your best. However, I'm an A student And I had no problem being an A student until that last semester. Now that I look back, I slowed up. I just really didn't care about the quality of my papers. Even at work, I just did the bare minimum. But I was still picking up overtime because I didn't want to lose money. So for a 2-month period, I was just existing. I was on survival mode. And I was about 22 years old. And I felt slow and sluggish, but I didn't do anything about it. Because in my mind, I was just focused on the finish line. I need to finish this degree. Thankfully, there was nothing wrong. It was just dehydration and burnout. Now, they did not diagnose me with burnout because remember, burnout is not a diagnosis. However, one of the nurses there talked to me about, you know, you're probably burnout. You are definitely dehydrated. So when you go home, you need to be on bed rest for a couple days so you can get yourself together. Like if you go home and you continue the way you're going to be right back into the hospital. So that is the #1 telltale sign. Remember, I told you with burnout, if you stop and rest, you typically will feel this sense of relief, like, oh, I can breathe. And moving forward, you would then have to figure out how to continue to lower that stressor. With depression, most of the time, even if you take the person out of a stressful situation, depression will still linger. There will have to be some ongoing things like interventions, like maybe medication and therapy, and they might have bouts of depression. Usually the cause of burnout is having to do stressful tasks over and over and over again over a period of time until you just hit a wall and you just become burnt out. Figure out what the stressor is and try to decrease the stressor or get rid of it. If it's your job, of course you can't just quit your job, but you have to figure out how you can modify or come up with a game plan to get another job, to decrease your duties, to change your duties, something. Because what happens with burnout is it will persist if you don't decrease the stressor. It does not go away. It gets worse. And it may even change and transition into depression because it'll start to affect your life. Ways to prevent burnout include being preventative, delegating duties to other people. If the stressor involves something that you can't not do, you might want to think about delegating. Something like parenting or having to go to work. These are duties that you can't just say, I quit, I'm not going to do it. So you might want to think about reaching out for help, delegating different jobs to different people, only working a certain amount of days a week, changing your schedule. You really have to be intentional about taking care of yourself because if you don't decrease the stressor, the burnout will persist. Another way is to do something creative. Change up the tasks. People who've experienced burnout report having to do things over and over and over again contributed to their burnout because they felt like they couldn't do anything else or they didn't have anything else planned. So try to break up your work duties and do something creative. Take breaks. You really have to manage it. I say this over and over again. I'll say this a million times. When it comes to your mental health, it's not something that you do when something goes wrong. It has to be managed. And a part of management is being preventative. If you're feeling well, the preventative activities will help you stay well. So let's recap. Depression and burnout are not the same thing. Depression is a clinical diagnosis and you have to be diagnosed by a licensed professional. There are certain symptoms and criteria that you meet in order to be diagnosed with depression. Burnout is a psychological state. It's driven by exhaustion and stress. You can have depression and burnout, but just because you have burnout doesn't mean that you would be diagnosed with depression. Some similar symptoms that people might experience with both depression and burnout is hopelessness, just not having a great outlook on life, low energy, and daily performance goes down, not being able to do those daily tasks. The way you address burnout is to attack the stressor. Think about what is stressing you, what task is driving the burnout, and try to take yourself out of the stressful situation. Ways to prevent burnout, of course, you already know: diet, exercise, managing your mental health, actively managing your mental health, making sure that you are delegating tasks, you are paying attention to how you feel when you're doing things, taking care of yourself and checking in, and if there's an issue, address it immediately. I appreciate you for watching. Some free ways you can support this channel is to like this video and subscribe to my channel. I go live every Friday. Join us. We look at the research and try to figure out how we can take research and apply it to our daily life. Be well, and I'll see you soon.